Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk over everything racing. Joining me in the studio, I've got Joey Barnes, Richard Youden, and Luis Torres. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Doing great.
It's been pretty good for the most part.
For the most part, yep. So good thing we're not on a football show because Louise has been crying about the Seahawks, but that's another story for a football show. But we are back. We're late getting back this year. We've had things going on. I've had some issues at home. Richard has been out of the country. Joey's been busy as could be, but here we are. We're back. We're a couple of weeks into the season. We've had a couple of interesting races. We've got two brand new winners in major series between one of our favorite people to talk about, Austin Cindric, who's now a Daytona 500 winner, and Scott McLaughlin, who's now an IndyCar winner in pretty dominant Penske perfect fashion there. We also saw the debut of the new car through these races here. We saw the NASCAR guys race in a football stadium where Joey Logano was victorious. And we've seen Alex Bowman is our most recent winner there in Vegas. And the Fontana race was won by none other than Kyle Larson, who's picking up where he left off last year, winning races left and right. Formula One is yet to begin their season, but there's a lot of developments in Formula One to talk about. Formula One being a big international series. And of course, some international events going on are having some effect here and there. So we'll pick a topic to begin with here shortly. Before I do, I want to mention we have a sponsor, and that would be Dan Blay Automotive Art. If you have a die-cast car, specifically an Indy car that you'd like to have in your collection, but they just don't make it, Dan Blay's your guy. Between Dan and his son, Michael, they produce some beautiful, wonderful custom-made die-cast cars. So you get a hold of them for a price quote. You can find them on Facebook. They've got a Facebook page, Dan Blay Racing Art. So go ahead and check out Dan. There's lots of photos of his stuff. And Dan, great friend of the show. We had him on last year, but the man does some fantastic work. So that being said, where do you guys want to start? Joey, you want to talk about St. Pete?
Sure, we can talk about St. Pete. What do you want to talk about with St. Pete?
Oh, okay. Well,
Nice vacation destination here.
nice vacation destination. Sure. Yeah, I think it quite funny. You had some folks that were, they were applauding Formula One for canceling the Grand Prix in Russia, but they were saying, but yet IndyCar is going to race in St. Petersburg. Well, so
Yeah, wrong one.
yeah, you and I know that St. Petersburg is in Florida, which is a nice vacation destination. And season opener, the earliest season opener we've had since 2004 was the last time the season opened in February. Unfortunately, we've got a 3-week break between races, but at the end of the day, it was Scott McLaughlin who was hot in practice, hot in qualifying, won from the pole. But it wasn't as easy as it looked. There were some different strategies going on, Joey.
Yeah, there were. We had Scott Dixon on kind of a unique 3-stop strategy that if he didn't get stuck behind Takuma Sato probably around the middle stint of the 100-lap race, I mean, you might be looking at Scott Dixon as the winner of that race. But it was a really good run by McLaughlin. Honestly, it was kind of like a coming of age just to see not just how he started from pole to get down into turn one, because St. Pete can be real challenging with the braking points there, and just how he navigated the traffic. I personally enjoyed the fact that, like, there at the end, we kind of see that it's just a straight up fight between him and Palou, right? Alex Palou, the reigning series champion, and he was unnerved. I mean, he managed to hold steady, and that's how you would like to see somebody pick up their first win, is not through a fuel strategy play and not through being third with the top two guys wrecking, but for a straight up fight where you're having to defend against the series champion. So it was almost perfect outside of the tumble in victory lane, but yeah, it's fantastic run. It's good to be Penske right now, apparently, with Austin Cindric winning the 500 and then McLaughlin opening up the IndyCar season with the win. So, but
right, and throwing Logano winning the Clash.
Yeah, right.
So, but I mean, McLaughlin, he's a sophomore driver, second-year driver, but he's far from what you would consider a rookie. I mean, here's a guy who's won multiple championships in Australian supercar, which are admittedly a very different discipline of racing. And Scott started off last year pretty strong, got a podium in Texas, I believe. But then he was kind of mediocre for the rest of the year, along with, the rest of the Penske team, save for Newgarden, who came on strong at the end of the year. Now Penske's, after two kind of uncharacteristic off seasons, Penske's really hot coming out of the box.
They are. And it's amazing too, when you think about some of the organizational changes that they've kind of undergone. I think the biggest thing that I was kind of surprised at, somewhat in St. Pete, was it's tough to look at the results as clear cut whenever you have the scenario with a caution that flies lap 26 or 28, somewhere around there, for David Malukas, and bumping the wall. And that was the only caution of the race, but it kind of throws the strategy out of whack. So some of those finishes that we got weren't necessarily indicative of how strong people were running. I mean, I look at somebody like Joseph Newgarden, who, I don't have the results in front of me, but if I remember right, finished south of 15th. I think he finished somewhere around 17th or so. You look at Rossi.
I think it was 16th, and Rossi was 20th. Yeah, but both those guys were pretty good on track.
Yeah, they had great pace, and with Newgarden specifically, fascinating with him because losing Gavin Ward, who he won his championship with, most recent championship with, to take over, roll over at McLaren. He's got a new guy on the box, somebody that's been on the Chevy engineering side that they've worked with, but it's still a new voice in your ear. So trying to see how all of that comes together, clearly didn't start off on the right foot, but with the result. But, Texas is up next. A lot of positivity there for Newgarden and company, just Penske in general, obviously, and kind of excited to see what they can do. Because, I mean, you look at everything with the growth of where things go with him, he always seems to start well whenever he's got a new engineer. So really curious what happens there. I think the other telling thing is Will Power being third. So you got Penske finishing first and third at St. Pete. I'd be very interested to see what happens with him moving forward. Because we know Will is bad fast. He's incredibly quick. He talks about the poles a lot because he's close to that record and definitely wants that record. So in some cases you look at that and you're like, is he more worried about poles than anything else? But the results are still there. If he can go and start backing up a couple of finishes, you've got to start looking at him and wondering if he's kind of back in form to be a title threat on a more serious level than he has been in recent years.
Yeah, Will is a guy you can never count out. I mean, the wins are fewer and farther between than they had been. There were a couple of, not too many years ago where Will was good for 5 to 6 wins a season. But the field has tightened up. But he certainly, he looks like he hasn't lost anything at St. Pete. He was there all day long. Last year was very disappointing for him. So it's really good that he gets off on the solid foot to start the season this year, because Will characteristically, historically, has a crap couple of first races. Even if you recall, not too many years ago, he had to sit out a race because he had an ear infection that they misdiagnosed as a concussion. So for him to not play catch up early in the season is, these other guys need to watch out, and we can say that, Will is concerned with poles, but heck, he's the winningest IndyCar driver in Penske history. You know, he's got all those records there. So so Will's going to be tough. I was disappointed most in the McLaren team. I really thought they would have brought a little more to the opener. I don't know if they came off the truck with a bad setup, but they were there, but they were just there. I mean, but you had guys like the Foyt team, who we expect to be lingering at the back. The Foyt team looked much improved between Kirkwood and even our Canadian friend, K-Line guy.
Dalton
Kellett. Both those guys were pretty solid to be in Foyt cars, all considered. But the McLarens were just kind of there, along with the Shank cars as well. The Shank cars were just kind of there.
I think that Pato finished somewhere around 4th or 5th. And, I look at kind of the rundown. I couldn't tell you where Felix finished, but, when I look at everything that's kind of transpiring right now with IndyCar, with the Universal Aero Kit, there's such a premium on passing. It's so challenging to be able to pull off the right passes because a lot of these venues are so tight. But then you look at the fact that, qualifying, because passing has become so difficult, qualifying has got such a premium put on it now. I mean, so the fact that he was able to come from like 10th or 12th on the grid, whatever it was, to get a top 5 out of it, I thought it was actually a really strong run out of him. It's a good way to march forward, good way to just get points. And, I can't disagree with Shank. I know Frank, you had mentioned Shank kind of feeling not necessarily like they were very strong. That was this isn't necessarily a slight. That's kind of what I expected right now. There's a lot to that team. Having talked to Elio over the offseason, there's a lot with that team that they're still trying to figure out, just because there's a lot that they still need to gather from a data perspective. So, in his words, he even said that, they're going to have really strong finishes, but then there's going to be some times where they just, they're not there. There's obviously hope that after you get through to Indy, that you're going to kind of gather some finishes and some data to get some finishes, et cetera. But, having hit or miss, I mean, I don't know another way to say it. This is IndyCar right now, right? Like everybody's hit or miss. The reason why Palou was able to pull off the championship last year was because he was the least inconsistent out of everybody. But I mean, usually you're going to see the champion have a mulligan, one bad race at least. I think Palou had 3 finishes outside the top 10 last year, maybe. But, beyond that, it's just so challenging. And the fact that if your worst day can be 5th, in the case of Pato, probably, I mean, that's how you'd want to start it. I think anybody that's finished in the top 10 in St. Pete's probably pretty happy. But I think also something else that might get overlooked a little bit is how tough it's going to be to build momentum right now in this season. Because when you look at the fact that we got St. Pete, and then we got 3 weeks later, we got Texas, and then 3 weeks later, we got Long Beach, like there's such long gaps between the first 3 races of the season. And even after Long Beach, we got another 3 weeks, and then finally we go to Barber. So the first 4 races really have such a big gap in them that I don't even know if you can really look at a guy and say, oh, he's won. He's got momentum. He's coming into this race with momentum, because there's such a break between the races that it's almost like you're starting fresh every week for the first 2 months of the season.
Right. Then
I've got a quick question.
Yeah. Then when we get into the summer, we've got several back-to-back races.
Yeah.
Including the doubleheader at Iowa.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
On this sort of breaking momentum. Now, obviously, yes, you're very right. It has a sort of a, not a negative impact, but it does make it difficult for the driver and the teams and the like to get into that sort of flow and that rhythm and that momentum of racing. But also on the flip side, do you think it's an issue from a spectator standpoint? Because there's these big gaps, and from the TV coverage, there isn't this sort of natural continuity that you'd like to see. And I'm not talking about the sort of the NASCAR level of every single week, but it just, half the fans, and because the calendar seems to jumble and change every year, it's, it feels like it's difficult to follow and keep abreast of.
I would agree with that. I think, if I was I don't know the details of what goes on in TV on setting up races for specific things. I know that there was a few conflicts here and there, which I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But the biggest thing that I'm kind of pressed on is the fact that, like, if we can't put 3 races in 6 weeks, like to make it at least every other week, I think you lose momentum, period.
Yeah.
And I think even more so, if you're, this is just my opinion, I'm probably wrong, but what the hell, you know, when you look at the fact that Formula One has created a new car that really resembles what an IndyCar looks like right now, and they're going to be racing before IndyCar races at Texas. If you're a casual viewer and you saw St. Pete and you're like, man, I really enjoyed that, I really can't wait to see those cars again. Let's just say one day you're channel surfing on a Sunday morning, you're going to see something in what I think this weekend, right? Or no, the weekend
next
after,
weekend. Yeah.
Weekend after next. You're going to be sitting there looking at it and you're like, oh, well, damn, now I see cars that look just like what I saw. They're a little different, but they look really close. Oh, and they're racing on somewhere else in the world. This must have been what I'm watching the other day. And now you get it. Now you're running into a scenario where if you're NBC or your IndyCar, in my opinion, you run the risk of losing the casual viewer because suddenly they're misinterpreting what was IndyCar to now watching F1. And it's not even a Drive to Survive hook to get them to watch F1. That's just natural progression because the cars look so similar now. So that's my concern. But
it's a very congested market, isn't it? You know, there's lots of competitors for that, as you say, that casual armchair fan who doesn't know who any of the drivers are, but just want to see cars going fast and that looks cool. And yeah, you know, I do worry that, and this has been, you know, I've always said for a long time that some of the racing in the IndyCar series is some of the best motorsport in the world. But if they can shoot themselves in the foot or any other appendage, they will do their damnedest to make it happen.
Well, and I think the other part too is like, it's not always IndyCar in this scenario because TV has got got so much power. And I think the part that I'm actually somewhat, this is the part where I would say that the momentum loss doesn't hit like maybe it would have 3 or 4 years ago, is because now you're starting to see advertising for IndyCar on the network on a regular occurrence. It's not let's just promote the Indy 500 and then you're going to hear word of mouth from a friend about the rest of the races. You're not going to see advertisement on the TV. Whereas now, you know, during the week, if I'm watching a hockey game or a basketball game or something, you're going to sit there and see a random advertisement fly up for this next race. So I think that's good. I saw it for St. Pete. I see it for Texas, and we're still a week and a half out for Texas. So I think those are really crucial, and it helps mitigate the loss of momentum there. But, you know, again, it still hurts whenever you're not going to be able to put something on track. And I will say this, though, not to go off the crazy beaten path, but we're talking about kind of where things are within the sport. Some recent announcements that I thought were actually really good were the fact that we're going to have concerts at Iowa Speedway. So not only do we have the recent announcements where Hy-Vee has somehow managed to get Pepsi and Google and DoorDash kind of involved with that race weekend, which is huge because, as we all know, it's not just that you get sponsors within the sport, but it's what can be recognized to the consumer, right? Like nobody knows what the hell Sonax is on the side of Renus VK's car. You know, but if you go and you talk about DoorDash and Google and Pepsi, everyone's like, oh, hey, I know those. Yeah. So you get recognizable consumer brands at that race weekend. But now you've got what they said, Tim McGraw, Florida Georgia Line, Gwen Stefani and Blake Shelton for that weekend for the doubleheader, which is great because, you know, we see this kind of interaction on road courses with trying to turn it into a festival, but we haven't really seen it at ovals outside of Indy. And this almost feels like you're trying to create a mini snake pit kind of vibe to the Iowa race weekend. So I understand the ticket price went up significantly as a result. Not a surprise. Kind of sucks. And I'm sure it's going to turn some people away. But at the same time, if some people are there for the concerts and somehow they watch some of the race and kind of get attracted to it, then that's a plus for the series, right? So
yeah,
it's at least worth trying. And I'd say at least we're in an environment now where IndyCars, at least, or people involved in the sport, are willing to try things.
And you got to take your hats off to Hy-Vee for being just all in on
Absolutely,
other IndyCar sponsorship, because again, to your point earlier, there are fewer and fewer direct-to-consumer marketing campaigns in motor racing, and simply because there are more effective and less expensive ways to reach your target audience than slapping your logo on a race car. And so, a lot of even in NASCAR, a lot of the sponsors you see are largely business-to-business deals, sort of things, and there's a lot of those in IndyCar. And the very few consumer products that are left are not doing a ton of activation. Even like Verizon's been great supporter for a year, but they do so little activation, or and I know it doesn't fall on the sponsor to promote the series, but if they would casually mention, sponsor of the Team Penske IndyCar, that would be nice. And even all the time Target was involved. You can go in a Target store and not see anything kind of related to the racing. But I had read a comment from a fella who was stopped into a Hy-Vee store somewhere. And he said the place was full of Jack Harvey cutouts and all through the store. So it's just really nice to see somebody with a consumer brand utilizing the IndyCar series to reach their their target market. And I wish them much success with it. They've taken on the promotion of the Iowa weekend. I hope it all goes well.
Yeah, I mean, the big and also there's TV spots with Jack now. So that happened during the St. Pete weekend, the You Don't Know Jack campaign that they're on right now. So that's encouraging, big investment from them. And this is kind of a wild thought, and I don't have the clear answer for this, but I'm kind of wondering because prior to 2020, before the world stopped and got all crazy, we had so many business-to-business sponsors in IndyCar to where it didn't matter about TV numbers as much. It was mostly focused on having drivers come up to suites and entertain and shake hands with guests, and whether that's like wine tasting or all this other crazy stuff that they do.
Right, and showcasing their technology, which is like what's HP and Arrow like to use automation to showcase their technology, those sort of things. Yeah, but it's not aimed at the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was pre-2020. And that was kind of how a lot of the businesses work that were B2B in IndyCar. But now you're running into a scenario where human interaction, human contact, things like that are a little bit more limited now, the masks and so forth. And now you're running into a scenario where maybe this is forcing different types of activation. Like maybe COVID in some weird way actually aided IndyCar in the long run because of different activations that sponsors are having to do now, to where now maybe it goes back to the way it used to be in some respects, not completely, but of how it's about TV numbers, how it's about activating with consumers and not necessarily driven to just show ponies and suites kind of type thing. So just food for thought. Like I said, I don't have the answer to that, but it's certainly something that I've kind of pondered in my own head fairly recently.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought for sure. So, well, let's move away from IndyCar again. We're like I said, a week and a half out from Texas. We will see the debut of both Jimmy Johnson and Romain Grosjean in their oval starts, and both of those guys, I'm kind of looking forward to see how they do on an oval. I mean, Jimmy gets so much crap from the fans for languishing at the back, but I am under the impression that he's going to be right there solidly in the mix when we get in an oval, and Grosjean as well. It's not Grosjean's oval debut because he ran Gateway last year.
Yep.
And he actually
it's his first big boy oval.
Big boy
Super
oval, yeah.
Speedway in a sense, Speedway and other sanctionings, but you get the point.
Right, yeah. I just forgot for a second he ran Gateway, and he was quite impressive at Gateway as well. So that'll be
If I remember, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
He was diving down the inside of people all over the place,
passing people left and right. Yeah, he's there. I like this. I like this short oval. So, all right. So let's turn our gears to NASCAR for a bit. We're again 3 races into the season plus the exhibition race at the Coliseum. And Louise, you spent some time down in Daytona to see Austin Cindric take off the win. And I don't know, we like to talk about Austin Cindric. It's just because I'm buddies with his dad, and we followed his career all the way through all the way through Xfinity and whatnot. And we always like to joke that the comment that he made several years ago, because I believe that my road to the Indy 500 goes through NASCAR. So I guess he's a step closer now to get to the Indy 500 by taking his first Cup win. But in doing so, he's got what 7 Cup starts to his credit.
He had 7 from last year, and he could have if a certain if the final pit stop went a little bit better, Cindric would have been up there with Logano and Keselowski at the very end of the 21 fire. He led several laps, so
right. But he's still considered a rookie.
A full rookie.
Still considered a rookie, which is interesting because there was a whole flap about Penske put out the thing and said Austin Cindric is the first rookie to win the Daytona 500, and everybody says Trevor Bayne. It was Trevor Bayne's only his second start, but because he didn't put into be eligible rookie of the year, he wasn't considered a rookie, which makes no sense in no matter how you try to explain it. But either way, Cindric considered a rookie, but heck, he drove like a veteran. He had a great race all day long, avoided trouble, stayed close to the front, and was there when it counted the most.
Yeah, it was an interesting 500. It felt refreshing that it wasn't much crash course TV. Yeah, you still had your moments with Harrison Burton and Keselowski's number of instances that he caused or didn't cause. But in all things considered, it wasn't like a total disaster like the last couple of years, like in 2020 and the first couple of years of stage racing. So that was refreshing. If they were all minor, it's not like all the field got wiped up at the end of stage 1. There's only a couple cars, but Cindric had a strong showing all throughout. He was there. He was either out in front or helping his teammate Ryan Blaney. He pretty much learned a lot being an offense and defense in that scenario. And I think him getting the win ultimately paid off. He just had to hell off Blaney. And Bubba Wallace, who showed up towards the tail end of the race. That kind of telling that Bubba and super speed racing go hand in hand. That he won Talladega, he did it on merit, he passed him when he needed to, and then in the 500, he's just had a strong joy when it matters most. And
oh my gosh, yeah, another 100 yards. I think Bubba would have won that thing. He was side by side at the line, yeah,
for sure. But with Cindric, it was certainly didn't surprise me that he ran as well, much less win it, because like I mentioned, he could have probably won it last year. But as far as the whole rookie discrepancy, I had to make it very clear on social media that Cindric drove last year's 500. So he's not part of the rookie bunch that ran the 500, which the highest finishing rookie, I might add, was Jacques Villeneuve, the ones who, as far as Daytona 500 rookies concerned, who all intents and purposes, he had a good showing, but then once the duels onwards, he's just kind of like dipped in the radar. The same with Biffle as well. Not a rookie, but his first start since 2016. That just reliability just kind of became an issue for those open cars that made the 500. But yeah, it was definitely a Ford weekend. Yeah, there was a little bit of period of time that the Hendricks showed up, but that was only in the dual race at some intents and purposes. But once the pit strategy and the duels happened, you knew the strategy might have been a factor, but Ford was just on top of things, and it showed. So fortunately, like I said many a times, if Fords don't shoot themselves in the foot, they'll win the 500, and they did win the 500.
Yeah, they sure did. Yep. So, but since then we've had 2 Chevy wins.
But the ones who won it were not necessarily the car to beat. Fontana was Tyler Reddick and even Eric Jones to some extent. Reddick was just there, and then the incident going into turn number 2, Reddick was about aboard, and then Byron just pretty much door slammed him for inexplicable reason that took him out of the running. But also the one that stood out is Trackhouse Racing with Ross Chastain and Daniel Suarez. In Fontana's, it was definitely Daniel Suarez that was in the mix. Had he made one decisive moment, could have gotten him his first win for him and the race team, but he just got outnumbered by Larson and showed up when it mattered most, and he got the win. But it wasn't like your last year where he dominated a race and just walked away with it. He showed up when it mattered most, when all those front runners were starting to either have single car spins, flat tires, or get collected in other people's mess.
All right, so let's talk about the flat tires now, okay? Because Richard, we began to have a conversation off the air before we started about NASCAR, the new wheels, the new tires, the lower profile, the single lug nut. The fan reaction is kind of mixed. There's kind of a lot of misinformation out there. We've been seeing some failures with flat tire. We've been seeing some failures with rims. We saw some teams try to modify the rims somewhat and get them impounded. So, Richard, what's your take on the new wheel, the new low profile tire on the new car?
Was there? I haven't heard any update from that issue with the. I think it was mainly Penske wheels, wasn't it? That had been
Penske, and then the Keselowski Roush team. The two of them, they had done some sort of modification to the wheel. They had them impounded, but that was during the duels, and they, in race trim, they didn't alter the tires. They were perfectly legal in race trim. Yeah.
No, apparently they couldn't. Yeah, there was some issue that they weren't. From what I read, it was, or the defense from Roger Penske was, well, the wheel rims we were provided didn't meet the specifications, so we just modified them to make them meet the specification, which is always a little bit of a contentious excuse, and it's not an uncommon one. But yeah, I think that on the whole, looking at it, to my mind anyway, the purpose of going to the single wheel or single lug nut wheel has been reasonably successful. They want to make the cars look more aggressive, more street, for want of a better term. And I think they certainly achieved that with these. They do look good. They do look modern. They do look like I hate to use a proper race car now. It's not 2 seconds off the average pit stop time. You're now waiting on the fuel guy pretty much most of the time rather than the tire changes. And from an engineering perspective, obviously the lower profile tire is more of a challenge, because I'm right in saying these tires don't have an inner liner now. So if you lose one of these tires on an oval, the tire just goes down. There's no secondary tire to sort of catch you, for want of a better word. And yeah, we have seen a few issues where cars have maybe locked up and had flats and then sort of beached themselves on the transition between the track and the apron. Some people have complained that the cars can't drive themselves back to the pits and the car goes a lap down. Or at the end of the day, you've spun out, and should you losing a lap is probably not the biggest issue when you spin out. I think that's a little bit of an excuse that people are maybe looking to try and find holes in the modern rules package.
Well, this is of course exacerbated by the fact they had to change the tire on Austin Cindric's car after he blew him out doing his burnouts to get the car to victory lane.
Yeah, I mean,
which was it's kind of fun and kind of funny, but not a great look on television.
No, but as I said, they'll live. They'll get over it. But obviously, one of the other issues you've got is obviously these are far lower profile tires, so you do get more roll on the tire. You do get more sidewall deviation around the bead, which is something you haven't necessarily seen in the bigger, older, taller sidewall tires that they've been running for however long it's been. So from an engineering standpoint, there are some changes going on there, and still the teams insist on trying to run as low a pressure as possible, and probably you know, without knowing for certain, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's teams there running well underneath the Goodyear recommended pressure. And a few years ago, McLaren Electronics, who provide the ECUs and the digital dash and the like to NASCAR, they actually implemented a tire pressure system, tire monitoring pressure system within the digital dash. So in theory, the driver could see each individual tire pressure through the digital dash. And that would allow NASCAR to monitor the tire pressures and make sure that, excuse me, people aren't doing, you know, running these tire pressures too low. But that was deemed too expensive. And it was a very, very expensive system to implement. So they don't run that now. I think teams can run it during testing, but during the race, there's no tire pressure notification. So teams to a certain extent can run pressures whatever level they like, and it does put stress and strain on the sidewall of the tires, and you will see more punches the lower they run the pressures because of the sort of lateral loads and transfer, especially on some of these ovals. So teams will, you know, they'll get there, they'll get it sorted out, but they're always going to try games. They're always going to try and, you know, gain an advantage, and you know, every little area that they possibly can. So I'm sure.
So how do you feel this is going to play out on some of the natural terrain road courses we're visiting this year? Because it's a whole lot easier to kind of get high sided if you've got running low tire pressures. If you're, you know, hitting one of the curbs there, let's say, you know, say Road America or Mid Ohio or even on like the Roval at Charlotte. It's a little easier to kind of get beached than it is on an oval.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you'll see is, I think there, more so than a super speedway, you'll see the drivers adapt, because one of the things you do have with these new lower profile tires is they are wider. So you have more of a, and you'll definitely see it on a road course because of the camber they'll run is not so staggered to fit or to suit an oval. On a road course, it's a far more neutral setup. And so with the larger contact patch with the road surface, you'll get more grip. So I think you'll see the smarter drivers not necessarily hammering the curbs and going for these, you know, shortest line. They'll go for the high grip line, which, you know, tires only give grip when they're in contact with the road. So if you're bouncing over these curbs and throwing the car around, you're not going to get the grip. So I think you'll see a change of driving style when it comes to the road courses, maybe compared to what we've seen in the past, because these cars are fundamentally road course cars, and they're designed with their independent suspension and their you know, these larger, fatter tires, and you know, there's not supposed to be skew in these cars. They're not supposed to naturally want to turn corners. That's supposed to be all in the driver's hands. And with stuff like the sequential gearboxes, which we know that some of the drivers, namely Denny Hamlin at Vegas last weekend, has really struggled with that. And I think we saw Tyler Reddick as well at one of the races damage his transmission. So there's a lot of changes there for the drivers to pick up on and learn. But I think you're going to start seeing over the coming weeks and months, you know, the smart drivers, the ones who are in tune with the car, should we say, are really going to start to come to the fore as they learn what these cars are capable of.
Yeah, it's sort of, that's going to play nicely into the hands of the guys with you know, good amounts of road course experience behind them. You know, say like
to a certain extent,
yeah, like an AJ Allmendinger, Chase Elliott, Michael McDowell to a large extent.
Yeah, but also I think, you know, certainly even in the time that I've been, you know, involved in watching the sport, you see less and less of these, you know, what you know, the road course ringer style, because the levels at which these guys now are working at, as these cars get more technically advanced, the demands on the driver are going to become more technically advanced. The drivers that spend the time in the simulator and doing all of this pre-event work, they're the ones that are really going to come to the fore in the, you know, coming months and years as this car develops. So I think it's going to, you know, bring in a new era of NASCAR and how drivers prepare and how they drive and what the level of expectation on a driver is going forward.
Absolutely. And I, you know, I'm going to be the first one to tell you on record, I really like the new car. I like the
I
way
agree.
I like the way it looks. I like the way it drives. I like what they've done with it. It's something NASCAR's needed for a while.
Well,
despite what some of the old timers might think, "Oh, it ain't stock." Well, it hadn't been stock since
nothing's been stock.
middle 50s, right? So,
but when you look at it as well, some of the things that the drivers have said is that with the old car, because of the way they were set up and because of the pure configuration of the car, those cars, and you'd hear some of them use this word, you'd drive them in the track. And it sounds a little bit difficult to explain, but as you turn the car, the car would naturally want to turn with the track, and it would be a combination of car and track that would work. Whereas with these cars, and I think you've seen it with even guys like, how often in the last 5 years have you seen Kyle Busch just lose a car in practice, or Kevin Harvick lose a car in practice? Relatively rare. And you've already seen that, some pretty damn good drivers in the first two, excluding Daytona, the first two races of the season, spin out in practice and qualifying or the race without any contact, without any help. And they say that the car is on the track rather than in the track, which means it's more in the driver's hands, and it's more in what the driver's doing necessarily compared to what the car's doing. So I think that's great to see.
I think it's going to be fun to watch how the season progresses and who really, rises to the top when we get to, we've got, what do we have, like 6 or 7 road courses on the schedule this year?
I think Coda's the first one, isn't it?
Yep, Coda's coming up. I think it's the week after IndyCar, Texas.
Yeah. So, all right, let's switch gears with the sequential one and talk about Formula One, because there's a lot of news in Formula One, although we're not racing yet. But let's start with the Michael Andretti and Andretti Acquisition Group. So Andretti Acquisition Group evidently she's now rebranded as Andretti Global. Submitted an application to begin a Formula One team in, I believe, 2024.
Correct.
He's got his application in, and some reports I've read, or people say, "Oh, Michael doesn't have that kind of money," and a lot of the reports I've read is that and Andretti Global and Andretti Acquisition Company actually has a lot of money, and that $200 million entry fee is just chump change, which makes me think they probably have an engine partner lined up. Now, there's been some talk of them and Renault. There have been some whispered rumors that they're talking with the Volkswagen Group. Mostly speculation, nothing solid, but this is Michael is 100% serious about this. I mean, he was 100% serious about buying into Alfa Romeo, and that fell through. It's now come out that he's actually 4 or 5 times approached Gene Haas about buying out Gene Haas, and Haas just wouldn't sell. So Michael's going to go on his own. Although Haas may be in a position to sell now, but that's for our next story. But so I think it's pretty exciting. A lot of folks think it's sheer folly on Michael's part, but if he's got the money and the partners lined up, and Haas as an American team hasn't exactly made a splash in the world. I mean, it's great that we have an American team in F1, although they're based in Britain and until very recently sponsored by Russian. But so Michael seems to be all in, looking at American driver, most likely Colton Herta, by most reports. So what is the likelihood that he actually gets approved? Because I know it's a tough club to break into. If you don't buy an existing team, it would increase the grid to 22 cars, which I'd be fine with that. When I first started watching Formula One, they routinely ran 26. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think the 20 car field is kind of low. So Richard, what are your thoughts on this? You just spent the last couple of weeks in Europe. I'm sure you've heard a little bit of that over there as well.
Yeah. More than 2 weeks. Goodness me. It's feels like a lifetime, but yes, it's, to tell you the truth, the reaction's been a little bit disappointing. You've had a lot of the big players at some of the other teams, and Toto Wolff, guys like that coming around, and the reaction hasn't exactly been resoundingly positive, to be truthful. It's been, oh well, he's got to make sure he brings the right money, and oh well, it's all been very like almost like somebody wants to join the country club, and they're not exactly okay with it. They don't want to, share the spoils with Andretti and his group. So that's been a little bit disappointing. And even people like Ross Brawn have turned around and said, look, guys, shut up. To reading between the lines, you need to encourage people to come into sport and help grow the sport, especially in the US market, where we have 2 races this year, and probably within 2 or 3 years we'll have 3 races, because they're very seriously talking about setting up a race in Vegas. So the potential is growing, with sort of the Drive to Survive Netflix series, which has been a massive coup for the US market with Formula One. So it's the right time for Andretti to come in. As I say, I've been disappointed with the reaction of some of the bigger teams, and obviously their mentality is, well, damn, here comes somebody else coming to take our prize money. And that's part of the thing. If you want to join Formula One, you have to pay like a $200 million sort of compensation package to the other teams.
Entry fee, yeah. So
well, no, this is different from the entry fee.
Oh yeah, you got to pay the other teams just to.
You've got to pay the entry fee, which is 100 and whatever. Then you've got to pay all the other teams combined another $200 million. I mean, basically, to do this seriously, you need $1 billion. In all reality, over the course of 2 or 3 years, before you can become an established team with no question marks hanging over your existence, you will have to invest $1 billion in those first 3 years, which is an astronomical amount of money. And we're not talking the $150 million a year or the $200 million compensation package or whatever other fees you've got to pay. This is a serious amount of money. And this is, as you said, the Andretti Group has a lot of money. Does it have that much money which they can spend for basically no return? It's not like you're getting that money back anytime soon. So there are obviously questions there, but I do genuinely hope that they do come on board, they do grow, and they do make it work. The timing is a little bit interesting. The timing makes me think that they have an existing engine supplier lined up. So Honda or Red Bull engine or Red Bull, whoever that is going forward, Ferrari, Renault or Mercedes. And I'm guessing it's going to be Renault out of that group.
Yeah, Renault has been kind of publicly supporting Andretti. They said they'd be there for technical assistance and whatnot, which you would imagine if Andretti's bringing somebody else as an engine supplier, Renault would not be right there to be our technical assistance. So
but the next big engine change is 2025. So why would you say you're an Audi or a Porsche or the Volkswagen Group, or whoever that may be, obviously under that umbrella of multiple companies? Why would you enter in 2024 when you've got to design another engine for 2025? So the timing, if he turned around and said, oh, I want to join in 2025, that would lead more down that road of a new engine supplier. The fact that he's saying 2024 makes me think to be an existing engine supplier. Not right, or
that he'll come in and use a customer engine for 1 year and utilize 2024 to kind of get his feet wet in the sport, and then bring in, a factory. Either way, but
I think these days the engine integration in the car is such a huge deal, and from an engine supplier, where's the benefit from that? Because they're not cheap things to do. In reality, engine suppliers don't make much money on customer teams. It's just basically a data collection tool, rather than we make Mercedes don't make money off Williams, for example, or McLaren. In reality, they lose because it's such a huge undertaking to produce extra engines for those cars. So I think if he is doing 2024, I think it'd be Renault. I think it is already an agreed on paper. You also got to remember as well now, Alpine, Renault, whatever you want to call them, Their new managing director is Otmar, and I can't pronounce his surname. Staffenhauser, I think is. But he's he used to work for Ford. He's worked in America. He's an American citizen, so he does have that link, and he probably knows the Andretti family reasonably well with his links. So there could very, very well be that tie-in there as well. So.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if we're going to have an American team in Formula One, I mean, the Andretti name is
100%.
Very recognizable, and then Michael himself is a brilliant businessman.
Oh yeah,
So I think he's the right guy, and the timing is right to get an American team in there. I know we have.
Well, this is
we have the Haas team, but it's
this is the whole misnomer again, and this is what happened with Haas. Yes, Haas does have a North Carolina base. Down, the building is opposite the NASCAR team, but they are their FIA license is an American team. They race under the American flag and all of that stuff. But from a design perspective and a car manufacturing perspective, they are a British team or a European team. They have very close ties with Ferrari, and this is one of the things actually
they're nearly an Italian team between Dallara and Ferrari.
And this is actually one of the things that Ferrari have used to circumnavigate the budget cap with employees. Is it's actually shifted a lot of employees from Ferrari to Haas, and I'm sure there's a lot of cross talk there with design. A lot of cross communication between that group, and of course the actual car build facility is the old Manor Virgin F1 team in Banbury in the UK. So the US arm of it is purely a marketing and branding exercise, and until last weekend they were fully sponsored by a Russian organization with a Russian driver, and as we've learned today, Kevin Magnussen is now returning to partner Mick Schumacher in that team.
Right. So let's talk about that. Yeah. So Haas had Ukraeli lined up for a sponsor, Mazepin as the driver. A ride that some folks felt he didn't deserve, felt he was in over his head. Certainly he didn't make any waves as a driver. But then of course the events of Russia invading the Ukraine has turned a lot of public sentiment against Russia, as it should be. So Haas opted to cut ties with Ukraeli and thusly cut ties with Mazepin because his seat was contingent on those sponsor payments. Now suddenly you have people defending Mazepin, saying, "Oh well, it wasn't his fault. You shouldn't make no, it wasn't his fault, right? And yes, he is collateral damage, but his ride was contingent on that sponsorship."
Exactly. And there's I'm sure in a lot of these contracts, there's a lot of what I can never remember the legal force majeure, I think is the legal term for it, where contracts can be terminated when either party brings the other party's reputation into question. And I think, given the circumstances of what we're seeing globally right now, a Formula One car branded with a Russian sponsor would certainly bring that the good name of the Haas brand and Haas automation into question.
Yeah, so, and certainly, and not only is Ukraeli, Mazepin's dad is a close associate of Vladimir Putin. So, which means he's right there in the inner circle. So, so Haas wants to distance himself. Of course, Ukraeli is seeking legal action and damages and wants a repayment of what they have put in, as they're likely entitled to. But I mean,
how they're going to get paid?
Exactly. Yeah, there's going to be embargoes on that money and whatnot. But at the end of the day, so Kevin Magnussen is back in the fold here, right?
And that was interesting that Kevin's actually got a multi-year deal because so obviously there's the finances there and there's everything in place, and as Gene has said for a number of years now, and he made the point again in the last couple of days when he was asked explicitly about this new, the pulling out of their previous Russian sponsor. He said the Haas Automation has always been the primary sponsor of the Haas F1 team. Yes, they've had other companies come along and had that, there's that Rich Energy and all that fiasco. And now you've had this fiasco. Yes, they obviously bring money to the table, but the common core backer of that team has been Haas Automation. And so there, as he says, hey, look, as any business would be, they always want a cash injection and a cash input. And sponsorship is obviously the way that happens in Formula One and any motorsport. But he's a pretty smart guy. He's run very successful businesses globally, and he's not going to have all of his eggs in one basket, purely relying on money from Rich Energy or money from a Russian oligarch. So I think the long-term future of that team is reasonably secure, and the fact that Magnussen has signed what they've phrased as a multi-year contract, so you're probably looking at 2 years with a possible third year, or however these things typically work. So there's obviously some stability within the team, which is great to see, because Formula One needs teams like this, and the people that they employ need the job. So I think it's a good sign long term for the sustainability of the team, and the FIA probably needs a little bit of credit here with the cost caps that they've introduced, and maybe that's starting to play out here. We obviously don't know the finer details of the finances, but it's probably a good situation to be in.
Yeah,
if they get an experienced driver to aid Mick in his second year, because remember, last year was all rookies. This time they have an established veteran that's been with the team. Even though he did say a while back that if he come back to Formula One, if he could compete for wins. Now,
please don't give me that crap.
I was going to say, he's getting paid handsomely, but I did want to talk about Pietro Fittipaldi, who was Gene Haas was very public in saying that if anything happened, Fittipaldi was their guy. And
he said that he
was the first choice,
the reserve driver. No, I think
the words that I read were he was our first choice.
Well, maybe.
But
I saw him say that he's our reserve driver, which. But I think he's doing, because we're obviously recording this on Wednesday night, I think, of the Bahrain test. So I think Fittipaldi is doing tomorrow.
Fittipaldi is doing the test. Yep.
But I'm sure Magnussen and Mick will split the Friday, Saturday running to at least give both drivers some more time in the car. And, you do obviously have a certain amount of sympathy for Fittipaldi here.
Well, here's the interesting thing, right? Though, one of the knock on the Haas team is they have not employed an American driver, right? Now, although Pietro races under the Brazilian flag, he is indeed an American citizen, having been born in Florida, and he holds dual citizenship in both the United States and Brazil. So that would have been, the closest thing we've had to an American driver in F1 since Rossi was in there. And just from a sheer marketing standpoint, this kid was born and raised in Florida. You can call him Brazilian all day long, but he's a Florida guy. But
does he have?
No. Obviously, Magnussen has got much more experience, and he's going to be more of an asset to the team. I would just talk it from a sheer marketability point of view. Here's our American team and our American driver.
But I would flip that and say, where is the marketability with him? Because if Colton Herta, wins the IndyCar championship and goes to Formula One, that's a huge marketing tool. If, I don't know, Jimmy Johnson ever went, or Jeff Gordon ever went to Formula One, that's a huge marketing tool because they already have that presence. And I'm not being disrespectful to it, but what's Pietro Fittipaldi done in his career to demand that marketing tool?
I'm just saying he's,
No, for sure. I know exactly.
Yeah. One of the knocks on Haas is they have not actively sought an American driver. Yes, they did employ Santino Ferrucci for a small time as a sim driver. But that didn't work out either. So, oh well.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a thought.
No.
I was kind of happy for Pietro. I had a chance to meet him and speak with him a few times. I like the kid. I think he's talented. I'd love to see him in great equipment, which is maybe not the Haas team, but at the end of the day, to be on the grid in a Formula One race is really something.
Oh, without a doubt. But is that again? You sort of, is that putting somebody in there because of their nationality or because they've achieved, the required results in the junior formula and the training categories to deserve that seat?
Fair enough. All right. So we've got a few minutes left. We've got Formula One testing this week, and evidently Mercedes is going to show up with a car with no side pods. Richard, did you read that earlier today?
Yeah, this has been going around for a little while. Apparently, Mercedes is coming with a completely new car for the second test. Well, this is technically the first test because the first one was classed as a shakedown. And it also makes you question how Mercedes are managing their budget costs when they can produce completely new cars between the first shakedown and the first test. That's quite an eye opener there, and with all the crash testing and everything else that needs to go on with it. But yes, I mean, you started to see that now. A lot of Williams have it. They have the radiators are basically in the cooling duct on the top of the engine box, and Williams, again, a Mercedes engine customer, if you look at their side pods, they actually have a pass-through over the top. There's an exit from the side pod on the top of the side pod. So very little air going into that Williams side pod is actually being used through the radiators as cooling. So if Mercedes fully understand the packaging and how it can be done, it's obviously a massive bonus, going forward to narrow that section of the car as much as possible. As long as they can mount the crash structure and the side impact structures, appropriately, then, it's going to be fascinating to see what they can come up with.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now I recall back in the 80s, the early 80s, a couple of cars with very similar design with the almost no side pods. I'd say a Benetton. Brabham for sure.
Brabham had one. Yeah, but if you
Brabham had one,
car,
car,
didn't the Brabham have the radiators in the nose?
I want to say the Brabham, the one I'm thinking about, had radiators right forward of the rear tires.
Okay.
And almost nothing in between, and then the little. Yeah. And I think the Benetton was the same way. When you talk about the Brabham with the radiator to the nose, that's a little earlier. I think that's a little late 70s there.
Before my time, Frank. Before my time.
Before your time. Yep. Yeah. So, all right.
It's going to be fascinating to see that. This time tomorrow, we'll all know.
We'll all know. Yeah.
Listening will know because it'll already happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, NASCAR, we're off to, is it Phoenix? Is that where we're going, Luis?
Yep. They're going to Phoenix, and we'll see how the Toyota camp do because Truex is the defending race winner in the spring race. Truex finished second in the fall race. That ultimately hurt him in the championship. But yeah, and also we have National ARCA and ARCA West is running along with Xfinity. Trucks don't run till Atlanta.
Okay, and just on another note, there was a was it in the ARCA series where we had an accident with the hauler?
Yep.
And the driver lost his life.
Yep. That was carrying Taylor Gray's 17 car, who, as far as I haven't heard anything if they're still going to compete or if they've withdrawn the entry because Taylor is one of those guys that I feel like would benefit running both East and West for the championships because out West is pretty thin right now. East is as thin as it already is. But that's irrelevant right now because it is a very tragic day. We have seen too many hauler incidents, not just in ARCA. We've seen off-road accidents that took the lives of James Hilton. I know the NHRA had one last year. There's been too many of those happening as of late.
Yeah, very tragic situation. And of course, our thoughts are with his family, friends, and the team there. Very tragic situation. As they try to lick their wounds and get back to racing. So we do have we can go ahead and Joey's put something weird in the notes here. Where we I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and pick us a winner for Phoenix. Okay, since that's the one race we got coming up this week. So Joey, I'll start with you. Who do you like for the Phoenix NASCAR race? I know you don't watch a lot of NASCAR, but I'm sure you know enough names that you can pull one out of the hat.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you read the messages finally.
Yeah.
Catch up. Let's see. Phoenix, new car. Probably I hate doing this because it seems like everybody's going to do this. I'll say Larson.
All right. So Louise, who do you like?
I'm gonna go with Truex.
All right, and Richard?
Yeah, it's Phoenix and Harvick.
I was gonna say it's easy to pick Harvick for Phoenix, but golly, Harvick hadn't won a race in a while.
Stop it.
It's
If
been a minute. Yeah.
If you picked on Marola, your chances would be better right now. It's just
Yeah.
Well,
But I'm gonna tell you what. I'm gonna tell you who I like for Phoenix is that's Chase Elliott. So with that being said, we've got Indy cars are going to be in Texas in 2 weeks or a week and a half rather. Formula One gets their season going. IndyCar and NASCAR, IndyCar at NASCAR at Phoenix. And we are out of time. So again, I want to thank Dan Blay Automotive Racing Art for sponsoring us. I want to thank you, Richard, Louise, Joey. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, and YouTube for carrying us. But most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. And we are back for 2022. So we'll be back in 1 week. Until then, good night.
Hoobazoo.com.